for giving us an opportunity to interview and hear your insights about Canadian social standards. Our CAP project is about standing up against oppression in terms of societal standards in Canada. These social standards include status, physique, and connections. Our 10 questions vary from talking about race to self-image. You can refuse to answer any questions you are uncomfortable with.
Well, what I would define it as is what society sees as norms and acceptable behavior for.
Okay, I think our country's social standards heavily favor white or white passing individuals. Our physical bodies as well. There's always more you can do. You can always be in better shape. You can always look better. And I think it's this like constant more.
A very unattainable standard, but social media has convinced them that it is, when in reality it's very much not.
Not much. Yes.
Yes, 100%.
Yes, absolutely they are.
Yeah, I definitely think societal standards in any country are influenced by social media at this point, because it is one of the primary ways that we get information and makeup and things, and how long it took just to have models of varying skin tones. And even then, just having like foundations that actually match people's skin. Like I can find 10 to 20 shades of pasty and my color, but I have friends that there is like one skin tone for like that broad of a variety of people. So our social media is everything. It's all we see, and it's geared to keep us scrolling. So it's doing its job, I think.
Always having conversations about shopping and about going to the gym and not eating breakfast and not eating certain foods and all sorts of really awful things that just come directly from social media, really.
I think the like hourglass figure, I think it's crazy because I almost think of hourglass figure as like an antiquated physical expectation, because it's not enough to be skinny. You have to be skinny, you have to be in shape, but you also have to have like curves in specific right places. I just don't think this like ideal human exists. And I think it's just like, I think that's the reason why it's the ideal human, is because no one actually can do it.
I think it affects them a little bit, but not that much.
I think it's quite evident, and just since social media has kind of become a large factor in the daily lives of everybody, that with the increased number of depression, I think it's pretty obvious.
I'll just say.
Yeah, I guess like social media can influence that a lot, and yeah, sometimes people just like get absorbed in it.
I don't know if I see it personally, but I think it's definitely out there. I think it's something people try to hide.
I definitely see students struggling with self-image. I think one of the biggest things that students struggle with is people looking at them. I'm a yearbook teacher, and I constantly run into students that are terrified to have their photo taken because they don't want to see what it's going to look like. And then we're not even getting into photoshopping, like the levels of editing that are done to photos. Like there are people that do not post something that's unfiltered ever. Like we don't see skin anymore. Like being a teenager is hard. And then being a teenager and not allowing yourself to have flaws is just impossible.
If you want to take a break, we can.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay.
I had to do so many.
Is when a person can live their life and go through their day without having any sort of hindrances based on their gender, their race, their ethnicity.
When you don't have to like worry about like basic problems, I guess, like food, water, shelter.
I think privilege is something you are born with, something that you accumulate based on your identity. Privilege is something that a lot of people don't think about. They don't think that they have privilege, and I think it's an incredible privilege to not have had to confront anything like that, never to have to really be in a situation where you're treated unfairly for something you can't change. It was that you weren't ever unfairly treated because of your skin color, your gender, your sexuality. That's never impacted it. Preferred style of hair is going to be treated with respect and seen as professional. It's that the way that you speak is going to be seen as worth listening to and intelligent. And I think privilege even comes down to safety as well, that your privilege will protect you in situations, that you'll be believed if you need help.
I think privilege is someone or something that has an unfair advantage over someone else.
I absolutely have privilege.
Yeah.
I definitely think I have privilege as a white passing, English speaking, cisgendered woman. I think I experience a lot of privilege in the sense that my English speaking is never going to be questioned because it's the first language that I learned. I'm never going to be treated as not understanding a conversation in a room that I'm in. Being cisgendered, that I am not questioned for a trans identity or treated unfairly. But I also think it's really interesting that some of that privilege came from trauma to my own family. My family's Métis, and I think one of the really difficult things is we don't have almost any information about it. The historical records are so thoroughly wiped out, but that was because my family couldn't get jobs. They weren't treated fairly. And to have to wipe out your entire identity to be accepted in a society is difficult. I mean, when you know where you're from, but like you've lost every piece of that culture, that's pretty difficult. But yeah, I definitely think I do have privileges in some ways, but I do know as a woman and as someone that's part of the queer community, it is incredibly apparent when you don't have privilege in a situation, when you're not listened to, when your opinion is less than or not treated with the same respect. I think it can be very complicated. So I feel like I understand privilege on some levels, but I also understand what it feels like to not have it in a situation as well.
I would have probably privilege. Just the ability that I have that I'm not working. I know there's not a need for me to work as there is. I think that there's privilege there.
I think it just kind of comes like when you get older, you'll kind of realize that you just have to have an open mind.
I think at a surface level, it probably starts with education and acknowledging that privilege does exist, whether it be with your skin color, your gender, and your race. But beyond that, I think we should strive to push the government to implement certain social policies and standards that would help us at least alleviate some of those socioeconomic issues that exist within certain groups of people.
I think some of the big things to recognize privilege is having diverse friendships to start. I think it's very difficult to understand what people go through if you don't know those people, if you don't try to learn. I think that's huge. Every time when I'm in my class, I always try to show diverse perspectives. And you'll always see someone in the room when they see themselves just like light up. And this might be a student that doesn't put up their hand, doesn't make any noise in class, but seeing themselves represented is so important. So we have to make representation important. People have to get out of their comfort zones and seek out diverse relationships. And I think we have to be willing to listen. I think our society is really good at like, how do I get the last word in? How do I win that argument? And like, we can argue in circles for a million more years, but like, when are we actually gonna start like listening to each other and working together?
Definitely education. Someone, in order to identify it, they need to actually know what it means and what they are looking at in terms of on the world scale. Looking at what the circumstances for other people in other places is a big part of it.
No, I do not.
No.
I don't think Canada's doing enough for the Indigenous community. I don't think you can promise that on every reserve there will be clean drinking water for 17 separate elections and just like, oh, oops, we didn't get it done this time. I think if we looked at if there was an issue with the drinking water in Ottawa, that would be rectified immediately. Like there would be no wait time. I don't think Canada is doing a good enough job of upholding our promises within our treaties. And I think the difficult thing is we always hear the statement like, oh, well, I wasn't there when we were writing the treaties. Well, you're living in the country that benefits from those treaties. You're living in the country that was built on those. I think we need to do a better job of Indigenous representation. I think it starts off for listening. Like, again, we have to listen, but like we also have to do something about it. And I think we need to do something about it in the way that Indigenous advocates are telling us to do it. We have to analyze the situation. We can't just help and do what makes us feel good, pat ourselves on the back and be like, hey, we did a good thing, if it's not actually helping anyone.
Yeah, I could see it, but I also do think that Canada has made improvements with, they're taking that step, so there is definitely action trying to be made, but like even just the fact that lots of the reserves don't have clean water, and that's been promised since a long time by politicians, that's a big issue that shouldn't be happening at all.
I do, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely hypocritical aspects to Canada being this, like, I hate the term melting pot, but I don't think anyone coming to Canada should have to give up aspects of themselves to be able to be here. Like, it's so archaic. When we look at immigration and bringing people in from around the world, I always look at what's the purpose of that. It's like, are we bringing people in to have a diverse country, or do we need people to work in certain labor fields? Do we need people that are going to take on jobs where maybe they can't advocate for themselves? Do we need it so that our gross domestic product goes up and we're making more money as a country? You're not really even from here if you're not Indigenous. So I think that the difficult thing is that if we're not upholding our treaties, how are we upholding promises that we're making to anyone that's coming here? And I think we can't build a real country that really cares if we're not upholding promises that we made 200 years ago. I think that's the start. Like, we got to start there. And if we're not going to, no amount of Band-Aids here, Band-Aids there, bringing new people in is going to fix the cancer that we've created at the middle of this.